Now let's talk about slogans. Why do I have slogans in a lecture component that is about visual arguments? Slogans aren't visual. Slogans are in words. Definitionally, slogans are in words. What's an example of a slogan? Um, Facts don't care about your feelings. Go woke, go broke. Defund the police? Black Lives Matter is a slogan. Riddle me this, Batman. How are slogans like visual arguments? It's not a joke, unfortunately, although I do think it's kind of evident. A slogan has to be unpacked in a similar way to a visual argument. It doesn't contain a premise or conclusion. Sometimes it may contain a premise, but most of the argument is implied. The effectiveness of a slogan is similar to the effectiveness of a visual argument in that it is short and punchy. It's easy to pass around. And of course, a good slogan has an emotional impact, a lot like a visual argument. And for those reasons, we would treat a slogan in a similar way that we would treat a visual argument, which means that we would figure out what the premises and conclusions are and write them down. And then once we have them written down, all neat and tidy, we can think about applying what we've learned about critical reading and criticizing arguments. It might be helpful if I tell you what a slogan is. So here is a definition that I paraphrased from Wikipedia. A slogan is a memorable motto or phrase used as a repetitive expression of an idea or purpose with the goal of persuading others of that idea or purpose. Since the point of a slogan is to persuade, that means we can treat it like an argument. But what are the features of the slogan that define it as a kind or mode of argument? Well, I'm glad you asked. Slogans are a bit like poetry in that they're catchy and concentrate meaning into a small number of words. Normally, a slogan will be a single sentence, usually either a claim or an injunction to do something. There's some examples here on the screen. The personal is political is a claim. Defund the police is saying we should do something. Often, a slogan has two parts posed in a relation. The personal is political. Meat is murder. One thing is another thing. Defund the police is saying we should do a thing to another thing. We should defund, do a thing to the police, another thing. Black Lives Matter? Black Lives Matter is sort of in between. Like poetry, slogans sometimes use rhythm, alliteration, or rhyme to make them punchy and catchy. Go woke, go broke. But it's important to keep in mind that it's how a phrase is used in a context that makes it a slogan. For example, during the Cold War, Americans would say, they had a slogan, Americans had a slogan, better dead than red. They said this to express their opposition to the Soviet Union, which was America's main geopolitical enemy at the time. So the color red was associated with the Soviets. So better to be dead than to be like them is the meaning of the phrase. But it was the fact that it expressed an attitude that they wanted to propagate that made it a slogan, not the fact that it rhymed. Where there's smoke, there's fire has the form of a slogan, but it's not a slogan because it isn't used to persuade people, and it's not used in a context where persuading people is the goal, like politics. Most of the slogans that we're going to encounter in the course and all of the examples on this slide are in a political context. But there's nothing political about the expression where there's smoke, there's fire. It's a saying, an aphorism, a piece of popular wisdom. It's expressed in the expectation that other people already accept it as true. It's not attempting to persuade them, sort of assumes that you already accept it. There's not really a side that you want to get somebody on board when you say a stitch in time saves nine. What is with that expression, a stitch in time saves nine? Have you heard that? Is that an outdated one? To me, it sounds like some sort of timey-wimey Doctor Who thing. Like you're doing some sort of, like you're actually putting a stitch in actual time. That's not what it's supposed to mean, though.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
The point of it is that if you plan in advance or prepare ahead, then a little bit of work now can save a lot of trouble later. So the stitch in time means doing the right thing at the right time. Possibly it wasn't the best example because I had to explain it. Oh well. You can tell the difference between a saying that is a piece of popular wisdom and a slogan because a slogan normally expresses something contentious, but the popular saying isn't contentious. What makes a saying a piece of popular wisdom is the fact that the populace, i.e., all the people taken together, accept it. Does that make sense? So, like I said, slogans are quite a bit similar to visual arguments. They're easy to pass around, they can be absorbed in a few seconds, and they also require you to have background knowledge or to supply information that's not necessarily there in the slogans. You have to fill in the blanks, much like in a visual argument sometimes. This means that the process of analyzing slogans is similar to analyzing visual arguments. The first step is to consider the context. Slogans rely upon background knowledge to work, even more so than visual arguments. Take the example, the personal is political. This is a slogan from second wave feminism. Unless you're familiar with that discourse, you probably have no idea what it means. Like, knowing the meaning of the words isn't enough to figure out the meaning of the expression. I know what it means, but to be honest, I would have trouble explaining it to you without also having to explain a bunch of other things. Background information. How about Black Lives Matter? I bet most of you are familiar with that slogan, but only because you were around for when it became popularized in the media a few years ago. If you don't have the context, the slogan Black Lives Matter seems very strange. I mean, don't we already know that the lives of Black people matter? Don't we all already accept that? Something is clearly missing. Why would somebody say Black Lives Matter? Are they saying that only Black Lives Matter? Well, some people apparently did think that because they made up a counter slogan, All Lives Matter, which incidentally is also something that everybody already agrees on. So it's peculiar as a slogan. But you see, these people who came up with the counter slogan, they jumped to a conclusion before considering the context. The internet is the land of knee-jerk hot takes, after all. who has time to type 3 words into Google so that you don't make a fool of yourself online? It's very likely that you already know the context and the background of the slogan Black Lives Matter, but I still have to lay it out for you in order to make my point. It's like when you're writing an essay. You have to explain stuff that your professor already knows, and you have to do that because you need to recall it to mind and make it clear that this is the thing that you're talking about and this is what you're saying about it. It's making sure you're on the same page, like that. So, context. In the US, they have a serious problem with police killing Black people. And it's been a problem for, well, for as long as we've been keeping track of this stuff. It's also a problem in some other countries like Canada, but not to the same degree. It exists here, but it's barely talked about. So, what are we talking about? We're talking about excessive use of deadly force, such as multiple cases of police shooting and killing people because they mistook something in their hand for a gun. That's what they said anyway. Sometimes, you know, something in their hand like a cell phone, or in one case, a sandwich. These people who are shot by trigger-happy police are usually Black men or even Black children, like many of them are teenagers. And we're also talking about police murdering Black people on purpose for reasons of personal animus. Most of the time, these cops are not even charged. And when they are charged, they usually get off. But like I said, this has been going on for a really long time, but until recently, you never heard anything about it. It wasn't in the media. There was no public outcry. So it seemed like people, the general public, or I mean, I don't want to say just white people, but it also wouldn't be wrong to say white people. It's like to them, it doesn't matter that Black lives are being taken by cops. Get it? So the meaning of the slogan is not only Black Lives Matter. It's something more like police are killing Black people at a very alarming rate, and the public needs to take notice and do something about it. But the police are killing Black people at an alarming rate, and the public needs to take notice and do something about it is not really something that you can chant at a protest, right? Slogans need to be easy to say. They're supposed to be repeated. It's part of the definition that I gave you. Slogans are something that you're supposed to be able to chant at a protest. They're supposed to be something that people can rally behind. So it needs to be easy to say and it needs to be punchy. And I can't remember if I said this before, but the meaning of the word punchy is something like it's sort of part of the meaning of the word punchy is that it sort of concentrates meaning in something that can be absorbed like in an instant. So anyway, step one, consider the background and context of the slogan. Sometimes you will already know what the context is. Sometimes you won't. Sometimes you may have never heard the slogan before. So if you've never heard it before, then you need to look up the background. This is essentially the same step as considering the context, the first step that I have for how to analyze a visual argument. And researching it can be as easy as doing a quick Google search. That was pretty much what I had in mind when I came up with the directions. How about we Google search the personal is political? Notice that I put it in quotation marks because I want it to be that exact phrasing. Okay, so the first thing you do, the very first thing, it's very important, is you completely ignore Google's stupid AI overview. Okay, prepare for a tangent wherein I rant about Google's AI overview. Skip to this timestamp here. Skip to this timestamp, which may or may not be on the screen, if you want to skip my rant about Google's AI overview. Google's AI overview is a pet peeve for me because it's useless and it's a great example of how shoving so-called AI into everything, it just makes the world worse. I swear, nearly every time I Google something, especially if it's a question, the AI overview will just um, plagiarize the first hit that comes up in the Google search. Uh, you can compare. That didn't happen this time, but a lot of the time you can compare the text of the so-called AI summary and the text of the first hit, and you will see that it's just plagiarized the actual text. It doesn't even rephrase it, like ChatGPT rephrases things that it plagiarizes. So what this so-called artificial intelligence is doing is it's just doing a Google search like you just did, and then stealing the text and giving it to you in order to pretend that it's actually done something. So that's why it annoys me, but that isn't actually the main reason why it's bad. The main reason why it's bad is that you can't rely on it. There's actually no way of knowing. You never know in advance whether something that a generative AI or large language model, that's what they're called. I think I might have talked about it before. There's no way of knowing that any particular thing that it tells you is true. I mean, there's this example that sort of went viral like about a year ago. I might have talked about it before. This was specifically Google AI, and somebody asked it how to make a pizza, and it told you to use glue. I mean, that's a very funny example, but what about all the cases that we don't know about where somebody typed in a question and it gave an incorrect answer that led to somebody actually harming themselves? Maybe it told them to inject bleach or something. So it's not only useless, it is actively harmful. Okay, end of rant. So ignore the AI overview and probably ignore the grumpy old professor and to notice that the first hit is Wikipedia. Okay, so like I said once before, I don't want you to use Wikipedia when you're researching your essays. What Wikipedia is good for is getting sort of like a quick answer that's probably going to be right in broad terms, but not necessarily right, when it comes to details. So right enough if you want to look up the name of that episode of Doctor Who where he said timey-wimey, but not good to use on the essay that you're writing for your pedantic and overeducated professor. Do all slogans have their own Wikipedia page? Well, almost certainly not. But since you asked that question, now I'm curious and I want to look up a different one. I will look up let's try Go Woke, Go Broke. Check it out. Go Woke, Go Broke. It says it's an American political catchphrase. Okay. Well, we're not going to talk about the difference between a catchphrase and a slogan. It's telling you to do something in short, punchy language. Fits our definition of a slogan. I'm sure Wikipedia would agree if Wikipedia were here in the room with us. How about facts don't care about your feelings? Does that have a page? Nope, it just takes you to Ben Shapiro's page. Well, we don't want to be at Ben Shapiro's page. We might catch idiocy. Yeah, so anyway, if you can just go with your first hit normally. It's not very hard, is my point. Okay, that's step one. Step two is write down the slogan. So let's do that. I will open up a blank Word document. Ah, here we are again with this stupid thing trying to force me to use Copilot, which I assume is some sort of AI tool. What the hell? All right, let's ignore that and press down the white hot rage and save it for the next time you're playing a barbarian in a D&D game. Go woke, go broke is our slogan. Now, even if you're not familiar with this slogan, and if you are, I envy you, but even if you're not familiar with this slogan, you can probably guess that go woke, go broke is short for if you go woke, then you will go broke. Okay. And I kind of picked this one because it's an example of how sometimes you need to, or sometimes it's helpful to expand the slogan itself into a full sentence. Now notice that this has the if-then structure that is one of the things that we're supposed to look out for when we're reconstructing arguments. So that's encouraging. All right. So let's say that this, if you go woke, then you will go broke, is a part of an argument. So it needs to be either a premise or a conclusion. So what do you think? Is it a premise or is it a conclusion? Now, many slogans are, in fact, conclusions. That is to say, they tell you the main point. They tell you the takeaway, what they want you to do, but not all of them. It's also quite normal for slogans to be premises and you're supposed to infer the conclusion. Similar to visual arguments, I guess. If you go woke, then you go broke. The if-then structure you will recognize as something that you commonly find in premises. So how about if we assume this is a premise for now? Okay, so if this is a premise, then we need to figure out what the conclusion is. And oh yes, I've been forgetting to say this, but remember, so a premise is like a technical logical, critical thinking talk term for what's normally called a reason. A premise is a reason to believe something. And the word conclusion is what the premise is trying to get you to believe. And so it means the same thing as the thesis of an argument. So today it looks like I'm going to be saying premise and conclusion instead of reason and thesis. Doesn't matter. This would be a good time for me to show you this one weird trick that I tell students to use when they're having trouble thinking of a possible conclusion for an argument, basically when they're stuck. So this is the one weird trick. You ask yourself, what is this argument about? You're almost always going to know what it's about, right? And then, after you've answered that question, ask yourself, okay, if this is what the argument is about, what is the argument saying about that thing? So tell me, what's this one about? If if you go woke, then you will go broke. Well, it's about going woke, obviously. But if the argument is about going woke, what is it saying about going woke? Is it saying that you should go woke? Hmm? I'm waiting. Okay, I'm tired of waiting. I bet that you said no. What it's saying is you shouldn't go woke. Woke bad is what it's saying. So let's fill that in for the conclusion. You should not go woke. And to make things clearer, and because the next step asks you to put it in standard form anyway, I'm going to put it in standard form, indicating the premise and the conclusion, so you can see which is which. All right, so now we have a premise and a conclusion. So that's progress. And Much like when we looked at how to reconstruct an enthymeme, it should be fairly obvious that we need a second premise in order to get from the first premise to the conclusion. It's like we've seen this structure before, should be familiar to you. What was that? Yes, yes, the guy in the back with the cowboy hat. You're absolutely right. The second premise that you need to add, which is in fact logically required for this argument to work, is you don't want to go broke, or you shouldn't go broke, or going broke is something you want to avoid. Actually, I like that one. Going broke is something you want to avoid. I'll remind you that often there are multiple ways of phrasing a premise which are the same in meaning or close enough in meaning. This is fine. So are we done? Well, maybe we're done step four. We still have to do step five, where you look for any problems or suspect elements, just like with analyzing visual arguments. But I just want to say we now have a logical argument. If you go woke, then you will go broke. Going broke is something you want to avoid. If these two things are true, what else also has to be true? You should not go woke. However, we're not reconstructing the argument for the purposes of getting it exactly right or for the purposes of having fun. The purpose of reconstructing the argument is to understand it so that you can criticize it and decide whether or not you're going to accept the argument. You can't decide whether or not you're going to buy an argument if you don't first understand the argument, right? And we're going to be looking at specific techniques for how to criticize arguments for the next several classes, basically the rest of the fall term. So a pretty clear weakness with this argument, at least as we've reconstructed it, but I'm pretty confident that the way we've reconstructed it is faithful to what the slogan is trying to tell us. Uh, a problem that kind of jumps out at me is the first premise. If you go woke, then you will go broke, or go. Okay, this is about movies. I mean, this expression mostly comes up in the context of people reviewing and criticizing or blogging about video games and movies, and sometimes also shows. And the word like woke almost always refers to basically diverse casting. So according to the people who say this, like like the word woke had originally had a specific meaning, and that's a very interesting story to talk about. We're not going to get into it now. Nowadays, it's been sort of twisted by the alt-right and kind of doesn't mean anything. But what it means in this context is actually fairly specific. So that's nice. What it means is it refers to diverse casting in movies and games and other media where there's casting. So basically, the people who say this, um, they don't like it when your main character or even one of your main characters, a major character, is anything other than a white man. Because if it's anything other than a white man, well, that's like forced diversity, you know, because being white and being a man is the default, right? You need to have a reason, a sinister reason, to make a character anything other than a white man. I know it sounds like I'm I'm like doing a parody, and I guess I am kind of trying to be funny, but this is actually what they think. Some people believe ridiculous things. I can't do anything about it. Not my fault. It's not my fault people believe ridiculous things. Do you know there are even people who don't like cats? Hmm. We might be drifting a bit far afield with my point. So anyway, what this first premise is saying is that if you have diverse casting, if you have anybody, if you're the star of your movies, anybody other than a white man, oh no, your movie's going to bomb. You're not going to make any money. That's what go broke means. And the problem with that is, wait for it. Are you ready? It's very complicated. That's not true. Actually, the whole reason why big companies like Disney and are there any more movie studios besides Disney? At the time that you're watching this, it's possible that Disney may have gobbled up all of the other movie companies. Like they bought Marvel and they bought Sony and they bought Star Wars. Anyway, I know too much about this stuff. Clearly, it's more efficient to have a professor who doesn't know anything. Anyway, so big movie companies like Disney, which are obviously profit driven, they make all of their decisions based on making as much money as possible because that's capitalism. They will do it because you make more money that way. And you make more money for a very obvious reason. That very obvious reason being white men are not the only people who have money. Did you know that? Did you know that it's not only white men who have money? It used to be that it was only white men who had money. Back in the days before you guys were born, women weren't even allowed to own credit cards. Anyway, so what Disney wants to do is to sell as many movie tickets as possible. We call it bums and seats. And people are more likely to go to see a movie if the movie stars somebody or the movie has prominent characters that look like them. So if your star is a woman, all other things being equal, women are going to be more likely to come to your movie. And interestingly, it doesn't work in the reverse. Like what I'm saying is having a woman as your lead instead of a man does not make men less likely to go to see the movie because I'm not sure if you were aware of this, but men like women. They like them very much. One example which springs to mind is a Marvel movie called what was it called? It was called something Captain Marvel. Yes, a Marvel movie called Captain Marvel. People talked about this. This was like kind of where the go woke, go broke discourse was really getting started, So they said, "Oh, oh dear. Oh, look, look, look. Like all the Marvel movies so far, all the Marvel movies have been starring dudes, and now you're having one starring a woman. It's the first female superhero in a Marvel movie as the star of her own movie, not just being in the movie. I think she was played by Brie Larson. Anyway, what they're saying is, oh, see, yep, you got a woman like superhero as your star. Women can't be superheroes. Nobody will want to see that. The movie will bomb. Go woke, go broke. You get it? Okay, so let me just pretend to look up how much money the movie Captain Marvel made. Oh, that's a very large amount of money, which I'm going to uh, insert into the edit rather than actually stopping and looking it up right now. I know from memory that it was more than $1 billion. So actually, Captain Marvel was a huge success, and it's a great example of how like the adage "go woke, go broke" um, is just like it's just factually wrong. The the first premise here, it's just wrong, and that's a problem with the argument. However, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. You see that's funny because I've already spent a lot of time on it. It's too late now. Stitch in time saves nine. That's an actual problem. However, I sort of want to drop that and move on to something that applies to slogans generally as a form or mode of arguments. And that is this. It's kind of in the nature of slogans that they try to manipulate your emotions. Something's not going to be a very good rallying cry if it doesn't contain some sort of emotional appeal, right? This might be why the personal is political never really took off as a slogan outside of academic circles. Oh well. But like I said earlier, an emotional appeal is not automatically a flaw in an argument. And I want to emphasize this. A slogan is trying to get you to do something, and people, you may have met some, people don't do anything without some sort of emotional investment. You eat because hunger is unpleasant. It makes you feel bad. You brush your teeth because you're afraid of cavities. This is perfectly logical. Returning to the slogan Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is saying, the point of the slogan is that you should care about the fact that cops are murdering Black people with impunity. And you should care about that. I mean, it's not just the slogan that's saying it, it's just objectively true that that is something that you should care about. There's nothing illogical about caring. And you should care about that. There's something wrong with you if you don't care about that. There's something wrong with you if that doesn't upset you or bother you or trouble you in some sort of emotional way. Emotions are at the root of all of our motivations. So an emotional appeal in an argument is only bad if the emotional appeal interferes somehow with your ability to understand and evaluate the argument. If it, for example, makes you overestimate something because you're afraid or angry. So the word woke, for example, is an example of this. It's like a trigger word for some people on the right, the right end of the political spectrum, which is the wrong end. They have been manipulated by the media to basically get angry every time they hear that word. So you just have to like soup, insert the word woke into whatever you're saying, and you like barely need to have an argument at all. Well, I guess a slogan is like the argument that wasn't there, like in the title of the lecture. The idea is that the word is doing the job of persuading instead of you being persuaded for logical reasons. So like the target audience of people who that the target audience that this slogan is addressed to. So, like Ben Shapiro's audience, for example, just to give you an idea. If they hear the word woke, they will just get, oh, so mad is that they won't bother to critically reflect about the question, well, does diverse casting actually mean that your movie isn't going to make money? So this would be an example of an emotional appeal which, boo, 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 interferes with the reasoning ability of the people in this case, and therefore that would be an example of a bad emotional appeal instead of a, let's say, a functional emotional appeal, which makes you care about something the appropriate amount. This is an emotional appeal which makes you care about something an inappropriate amount, way too much, and possibly make you care about it in the wrong way. Okay? So that's two examples of emotional appeals in slogans. One where it's totally fine because it's just getting you to care about something in a normal and appropriate way, and another one whose purpose, whether it works on you or not, the purpose of the go woke is an emotional appeal that's supposed to short circuit your reasoning abilities because it's targeted for people who have been conditioned to get angry every time they hear this word. I'm going to take a break now. Okay, let's quickly do Black Lives Matter as a second example and then call it a night. We've actually already started the process of reconstructing slogan Black Lives Matter when I said police are killing Black people at an alarming rate and the public needs to take notice and do something about it. Okay? Now, my question for you is this a premise or a conclusion? Or, or is it both a premise and a conclusion like in an NC meme? Well, remember what I said about putting arguments in standard form, how we should write down each premise and conclusion as a separate claim. So premise should contain one claim, not more than one claim. Conclusion should contain one claim and not more than one claim. So my question for you is this statement a single claim? Police are killing Black people at an alarming rate, and the public needs to take notice and to do something about it. One claim, two claims, 22 claims. Sold to the orange kitten. The correct answer is two claims. And there's a hint that there's two claims, a pretty strong hint, which is the word and. See, police are killing Black people at an alarming rate, and the public needs to take notice and do something about it. That's another and. We'll get back to that. Now, and is a pretty good hint that we're dealing with more than one claim, but I want to emphasize that it is just a hint. It tells us that we should try separating the sentence into two claims and see if that works. But that you can't assume that it's always going to be two separate claims when there's an and. Try it, see if it works. In this case, I believe it does work. When we separate them and correct the punctuation, it seems pretty clear that police are killing Black people at an alarming rate, and the public needs to take notice and do something about it. Those are two separate things. So what's the difference between that and the second and? The public needs to take notice and do something about it? Well, I mean, it's possible that you could separate these, but you could also read take notice and do something about it as functioning as part of the same claim. Sort of like you can't really do anything about it until you notice it. So they go together in that way. And take notice sort of implies doing something about it, doesn't it? I mean, it kind of seems that way to me. If only we could ask the person who actually came up with this sentence. Oh well. How about this? We change the conclusion to the public needs to stop police from killing Black people. I mean, we'd have to rephrase it anyway. You remember what I said about it and that and this and other pronouns in premises and conclusions, where it's better to be specific, to use the thing that the pronoun is referring to. So we would have to change the it to be the police killing Black people. And if we're going to change that, then why not make it quite straightforward, not worry about the and. The police, the public needs to stop police from killing Black people. I think we can all agree that that's the intention of the slogan. It is fine, although we could improve it by making it more specific. How about police are killing Black people through the use of excessive force and deliberate murder at an alarming rate. We could also possibly change alarming rate to something more specific. I didn't do that in the text that I prepared because the slogan doesn't really specify, right? I mean, the slogan doesn't give statistics. It just leans on your general knowledge that this is a thing that's happening and it's not a rare thing, it's a consistent thing. It's good to make premises more specific, but you shouldn't be adding information into the premises that's not there. And of course, that is a bit confusing because I said when you're reconstructing and analyzing visual arguments and slogans, you are going to have to add information, but there's a reasonable line to be drawn. The slogan relies upon a background knowledge that this is a thing that is happening. It doesn't, however, rely upon specific statistics. Now, we need to add a second premise, but I kind of hesitate to do it because it is so obvious. Police are killing Black people through the use of excessive force and deliberate murder at an alarming rate. Premise two, killing Black people is bad. Do you see why I said it was obvious? Actually, that gives me an idea. How about this? Premise one, police are killing Black people through the use of excessive force and deliberate murder at an alarming rate. Premise two, Black Lives Matter. Conclusion, the public needs to stop police from killing Black people through the use of excessive force and deliberate murder at an alarming rate. So this version is, I don't know, cooler than just saying killing Black people is bad. It's cooler because it sort of makes you go, aha, oh, I see what you did there. You fit the slogan in. He said the thing. But it's also less precise than killing Black people is bad. I mean, didn't we go through this whole process of reconstruction because it wasn't because Black Lives Matter wasn't sufficiently explicit? Well, it's fine. It's fine. Either way, it's fine. The point of showing you these different versions is to remind you that in filling out the implied premises and stuff, you have room to express it in different ways. And sometimes there might be different reasons to express it in different ways. Does that make sense? So what about step five? Are there any weaknesses with this slogan as an argument in the way that we have reconstructed it here? Well, it kind of has the same problem as the first example, doesn't it? The first premise, police are killing Black people through the use of excessive force and deliberate murder at an alarming rate. This is a claim. It is, in a way, a statistical claim. It's just a very vague statistical claim. At an alarming rate sort of gestures at numbers, but it doesn't tell you what the numbers actually are. Now, when we were doing critical reading, when we were going through texts and I was showing you how to read critically, I said that you shouldn't accept statistical claims unless they have citations, right? A citation lets you look up the information and verify it for yourself, or determine if there were any problems with the methodology, or in fact, whether they just made it up, which is a thing that happens more often than you'd think. So isn't that a problem with the premise? Well, I think the answer is no. In my opinion, it's not actually a problem with the premise because this thing about the epidemic of cops killing black people in America is common knowledge. Some of you may not have heard of it, but it's common enough knowledge to count as common knowledge. I mean, if you've gotten to the point where you were able to reconstruct the slogan into this form, you would have encountered that information. Either you already had the information as a part of your general knowledge, or you would have encountered it in the process of reconstructing. So either you knew it or you had it verified. And for that reason, I think it's different from the first one, Go Woke, Go Broke, where the claim that it made that movies and games and whatever with diverse casting don't make as much money, that's that's not true. Not only is it not true, it's not even one of those common misconceptions that I went over in one of the previous classes. It not only is it not true, it isn't even actually a thing that people believe. And so that one we could very easily discard as a premise that's not acceptable. In this case, though, it's just tapping in to the background knowledge that you need in order to understand what the slogan is saying. Now, if you were very clever, and I mean annoyingly clever, you might point out that at the time, if you place it into context, like I asked you to, at the time when the slogan was coined, perhaps it wasn't, probably it wasn't common knowledge that police have been killing black people at an alarming rate in America, and it's really bad. That's kind of why the slogan exists. The slogan exists because people didn't know and they needed to be informed, or at least they needed to take it more seriously. However, let me ask you, what is the purpose in reconstructing and evaluating arguments? Well, the purpose that I've been saying over and over in this course is that whether or not it's to determine whether or not you should buy into the argument, whether you should accept its conclusion. And that's whether you should accept its conclusion right now in real life. It's not about some hypothetical you who heard the slogan for the first time 5 years ago, right? I mean, evaluating arguments is is not like rating movies or TV shows. It's not like saying that, well, the special effects in the original Star Trek were pretty good for the time. That's not what we're doing here. We're not constructing a top 10 list of famous slogans where we evaluate how good they were at the time. That said, it is technically true that when the slogan was first coined, it probably wasn't common knowledge, or it was less common knowledge that there was a serious problem with cops shooting and killing black people and not facing any consequences. So if you gave that as an answer or part of an answer on an assignment, you would be demonstrating a good understanding of the background context and also of how slogans work. So I would very definitely accept that as a criticism, and you would, you know, get a good mark on that part of the assignment. It's fine. I'm trying to encourage an approach to this course where what matters is how you can apply it to your life, but I guess assignments are a thing in your life when you're in university, so sure. you gave that as an answer, I would totally accept it. Okay, so that's two examples of how to analyze slogans as arguments. One easy example and one not so easy example. So I think that's enough for now. We will be returning to the topic of visual arguments and slogans in future classes. You may be encountering further examples of them. We'll also be returning to the topic of racial profiling and possibly how we got to this place where a minority is the victim of police violence. Like, how did that happen? There are historical reasons, and those historical reasons help you to understand the world that we live in now. But that will do for this week, and I will see you next time.